growing up, and I hate to admit this, but I just got to be transparent. I was very anti-missions. I didn't like missions. I didn't like that we did missions. I would say the line, why are we helping people there when we should be helping people here?
Lots of people here. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like, why are we doing that? Well, what happened was, I think God really started working on my heart, kind of softening me a little bit to that. And years ago, it was about 2008, Rod and Nancy Vernon, they invited us to a concert up in Tulsa, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Michael W. Smith concert. Michael W. Smith got up there and started talking about Compassion International, about how you sponsor kids and how you can like meet your kids. And I was just kind of like, wow, this sounds different. And I take my son Camden down there and we look at the booth and we start talking to him. I'm like, so is this real? This kid's really going to be helped. Mm-hmm. You know, because I was so skeptical. Yeah.
I'm that way. I'm that guy.
I didn't trust anybody with this stuff. And I remember I went back to Shelly and I said, hey, listen, I'm kind of feeling pulled. Like maybe we should sponsor a kid. And she just looked at me. She goes, I am too. I think we should. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do it. So we sponsored 2 kids. And 2 years later is 2010. I decided to take our family to Kenya to meet our sponsored kid. So we go to Kenya, and Casey is 9, Camden is 10, 11, and we spend a week in Kenya. Now, this is the first time we've ever been to poverty in the world. I mean, first time in our lives we've ever been to poverty, okay? We know nothing, right? One day of the trip, they tell us, they say, hey, be prepared tomorrow. We're going to go off-road, and we're going out into the bush, and so, you know, whatever. So we get in these 4x4s, and they drive us 3 hours out in the middle of the Masai Mara. Pastor, when we get out here, they take us on these home visits. And I'm going to tell you now, I saw poverty like I didn't even know existed. I mean, kids that literally were dying, right? And they told us before we went, they said, be very careful with your girls because girls have little value here. They'll marry girls as early as 9. My daughter's 9. And so they told me to be very careful with the girls, keep them close. And we're in this village for, I don't know how long it was, but I'm just overwhelmed with emotion. I mean, these kids, like every orifice is just covered in flies. These kids are dying. And I remember I asked the compassion worker there, I said, listen, what is the death rate of these kids? And he said, well, we're really not sure, but we estimate right here where you're at, about 40% will die by 5. I don't know if that was the real number, but I know that's what he said. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at these faces, and I had no reason to disbelieve it. I'm just overwhelmed with emotion. And Pastor, I mean, it's like all these things coming back in my mind, like, whoa. What have I been doing, right? Mm-hmm. And why have I said some of the things I've said? And we go through some homes, whatever, and Shelly's missing. I can't find her. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And I'm getting chills telling it right now because it's so real to me, that moment, going back, I can't find her. And everyone, you know, I'm like, have you seen Shelly? No one can find her. And I'm just praying, God, I have taken my wife out of this country for the first time to come here, and she is gone. And I walk around to the backside of the 4x4, and there was Shelly sitting in the dirt of the Serengeti, leaning against that tire, just sobbing. It's the most impactful moment of my Christian life. She grabbed me by the collar. I'll never forget it. She pulled me right up against her face and just sobbing. And she said, no child should live like this. She said, somebody's got to do something. Now, as a man, that's a tough thing to hear from your wife because we're such solutionists, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. We see a problem. It's like, I want to fix that.
Right.
As Christian men, we've got to remember we are not the solution, right? God is the solution.
That's so good.
I remember when she grabbed my collar and held me at her nose and said that, I said to her, and I remember word for word what I said. I said, I have no idea how to fix this, but I promise we'll do something. After that, then it was, okay, now what? So that's when Shelly and I said, hey, maybe there's more for our family. And so that's when we decided that we would adopt. You know, we started with Russia. We had some friends that adopted from Russia. So we said, okay, we'll adopt from Russia. And we wanted to adopt girls because we knew girls were in really bad shape that came out of orphanages. So we started that. We get a year and a half into it, and Putin decides no adopted kids can leave his country or none can go to the United States, and it closed. So when it closed, that was a really hard moment. You know, we really felt like God had taken us there. But it was, okay, God, then what? So we decided to go with the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's one of the poorest countries in the entire world. It's in South Central Africa, huge country. The capital city is Kinshasa. We decided to adopt from Kinshasa. Again, we were going to adopt 2 girls. We get notified by our agency that a boy and a girl twins came available. And so we went ahead and agreed to do that. We finished our work there. Our kids, it's time for Clarity and Creed to come home. President Kabila declares no adopted kids can leave his country, just like before. So the numbers are rough here. It's about 30 U.S. families with 50 adopted kids. We buy a home down the road from the president, move all our kids in. We hire 6 full-time nannies, a house dad, and put in Congolese internet. And our kids live there. And we pay for it. All these families pay for it. And we'll travel over. We would travel over and stay with them for a week or two. And we're spending astronomical money because by then we're starting the Ugandan process of adoption. We're paying here. We find out later there's a huge embezzlement scandal going on in this whole thing. And we get dead broke. And now when I tell you dead broke, I'm talking like everything. Like we are broke. And so what happens is our Congolese kids have been stuck for almost 2 years. Our Ugandan kids, the 3 from Uganda that we're adopting, we get right up to the point that it's time to where we got to make like final decision. The problem is we have 2 kids in our home now. We're waiting on 2 from Congo, and now we've got 3 from Uganda. They're supposed to come home. The Congolese law says you only have 4 kids in your home. So the agency calls us and says, listen, you got to make a decision. If you bring the 3 home from Uganda and then Congo opens up and you have to go to court, you lose your Congolese kids, even though you met them and you Skype with them every Sunday. Or you can go ahead and take the 3 Ugandan kids, or you can tell your Ugandan kids go back to the street, or you can take the Ugandan kids and hope it works out. So again, full transparency. I told Shelly, we got to let the Ugandan kids go back to the street. I said, we've adopted these 2 from Congo. They know us as mom and dad. We've been over there. They've seen us. We can't take that chance. She said, I disagree. She said, I believe God knew all along. And she said, I think we just be dependent upon God. And that had been our motto that whole year, be fully dependent on God. And she said, I think we bring the Ugandan kids home and hope it works out. So I said, okay, that's what we'll do. We tell the agency we're going to bring the Ugandan kids home. So we get to the end of August and we have to pay $30,000 to the Ugandan government to finalize that part of the adoption to make it happen. Again, now we were broke. We had spent so much money in this that we didn't have $30,000. We had $10,000 at the end of August. So we get to the end of August and we're $20,000 short. We don't have the money. And I called the agency and I said, hey, we can't do it. And I said, is there any way we can get an extension? They contact the Ugandan government, get a 1-month extension. And she calls me. She says, there will not be another extension. You got to pay $30,000 in next month. The whole next month, we're trying to get ahead, but we're spending so much on Uganda and Congo. And so we get a week out from our payment and we're still at $10,000. And Shelly keeps asking me, how we, and I'm like, I don't know, but we got to pray God provides. God's got to provide. Now, I told you at the beginning, I work with high school students on the ACT test. So when I travel to a high school, students will pay by the student. They'll pay $30 a student. They come to my class. And so, that's how we make our living. Well, my assistant calls me and says, Chad, you're going to Anson, Texas tomorrow. And I don't do workshops that far away in the fall because I coach high school football at CHA. I said, well, why did I agree to that? She said, I don't know. You did, though. And you're going tomorrow. So tell coach you're going to miss practice. I'm like, okay. So I pack everything up. Now, this is a 5-hour drive. This is a 5-hour drive to Anson, Texas. It's in the middle of cotton fields in West Texas. And the whole time, 4.5 hours, I'm talking about a prayer now of God. You know we have given. You know we didn't do this selfishly. You know we're trying to follow the gospel. You know we're trying to love people. That's the only reason why we chose to adopt. We didn't do any of this selfishly. And I'm like, God, you know that. I'm like, God, you've got to come through. And for 5 hours of that drive, it was that prayer. Like, God, I'm desperate. Please, God, I know you're real. I've lived for you my whole life. I know you're real. But I need you to show up. I walked into that high school. I go down to the auditorium. I go to the front, and I start setting up my projector and stuff. And I remember as I'm setting up out of the front left of my peripheral vision, I noticed that these kids start coming in and like start filling. And I'm talking filling like every seat. And I remember just kind of going, what is going on? This has never happened. I'm like, what is going on? And the counselor comes down in a panic. She says, listen, did you bring more stuff? I said, I brought everything I had. She said, go to your car, get everything you've got. We got busloads pulling in. And I walked out to my car, and Pastor, I am not making this up. Bus after bus after bus is pulling into that little schools.
In the middle of Texas.
In the middle of West Texas. And I walk back in that auditorium, the whole thing fills. Now, I remember I'd been doing the workshop 24 years at that time. The largest group I'd ever had was 310 students. I called the counselor, the superintendent, the principal, and I said, listen, I can't start. I got to tell you my testimony. And I said, we are 5 days away from $20,000. A $30,000 payment. I got 10. I'm 20,000 short. The Ugandan government or my 3 kids go back. And the counselor, I remember, she just started crying. She hugged me. And she said, Chad, there are 642 paid kids in this auditorium right now. She said, we'll mail you a check tomorrow. They mailed me a $19,000 check, and we made that payment.
That's unreal, brother.
Yes, unreal. Tell me God's not real.
Yeah.
Tell me he didn't just pour something out that was just unreal. That's incredible.